Welcome to The World Awaits.
Travel tales to inspire your wanderlust.
I'm Kirsty Bedford, journalist, editor and travel writer.
And I'm Belinda Jackson, author, travel journalist and columnist, and we're your weekly co-hosts.
Hi there, welcome to our summer series. This week we're going full aviation geek, chatting about how to hack your airline bookings with our guests Chris Chamberlain and Mark Trim. Chris, who is senior editor with the website Points Hacks, teaches you how to best use the frequent flyer points system to get up front with free upgrades, cheap fares and lounge access.
Chris, welcome to The World Awaits. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I was just listening actually the other day to your most recent podcast with Kevin from Travel Guides. I love that show and he's so funny. So I hope we can be even half as funny as him.
He's professionally funny. Oh, don't know about that one. Let's give it a crack. I can kick off with that because the reason why I really wanted to have you here on the podcast is it's purely motivated by self-interest. Basically, I'm looking for a masterclass on getting into gold class or silver or, really, I'm not picky. But without throwing gazillions of dollars at the airlines. So every time I see you on social media, you're either jumping on a plane or an airport lounge drinking champagne somewhere, or just arriving somewhere that is not home here in Melbourne. And then when I read your profile on Point Hacks, it tells me you have travelled over 2 million kilometres in business and first class, which is, as it says, more than 2 return trips to the moon. So tell me, please. How can I stop sitting down the back of the plane near the toilet and get up to the front, the more fragrant end of the plane?
Frequent flyer points. Those are the secret tools. If you don't have frequent flyer points, you are traveling wrong, I must say. So where I'm from at Point Hacks, that's exactly what we do. It's in the name. We teach people how to spend their points better, how to earn more points. And we publish some great stories based on how you can fly at the front and it actually costs you less than economy. So we did a campaign the other week where, it's a tough day in the office. My work sent me flying first class from LA to Sydney on Qantas, spending company points. And the actual cost in dollars to book that ticket is less than $300 cash. So while there'll be people, downstairs on the plane, sitting at the back of economy who've probably paid a couple of thousand, I'm in row one paying less than $300, drinking champagne for 15 hours. It's not that hard once you get your head around it, but so few people understand how it works. And that's where we come in to help you not have to sit right down the back near the toilets.
It is totally, it is a dark art. I mean, hacking points. I find it quite a tricky one. But before we start transforming my travel life, and hopefully everybody else who's listening along, do we need a little clarification on terminology? And that is, what is the difference between frequent flyer points versus status points?
Yeah, so frequent flyer points are the points that you earn and can spend on flights. So you might earn points from taking out a credit card or staying in a hotel, taking a flight. But these are the points that you can redeem for a flight, for an upgrade, that kind of thing. When it comes to frequent flyer status, which is whether you are silver, gold, platinum, or even higher than that, you earn something different, which in Australia, Qantas and Virgin Australia call status credits. And they cannot be spent on flights. You can earn as many status credits as you want. They're not redeemable. They exist only to work out where you sit in that frequent flyer chain. So frequent flyer points are the points that you spend. Status credits give you credit towards gold or platinum.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, let's get into the nuts and bolts of it. What is the quickest way to get me from the back down the toilet, up the front drinking champagne?
Well, you want to earn those points, and there are so many ways you can do it. I mean, clearly the obvious one is to fly, but people who are flying once a year for holidays, you're not going to earn that many points that quickly to achieve that. So what a lot of people do is they take every opportunity to earn points, and most of those opportunities actually exist on the ground. In fact, Qantas changed the name of its currency a few years ago from a Qantas frequent flyer point to simply a Qantas point, because more points are now earned on the ground rather than in the sky. So you can get points by doing things like applying for a credit card that has a bonus points offer, or spending on a credit card that gives you points. You can earn points staying in a hotel. You can earn points without leaving the couch by shopping online. You can earn them at the supermarket, the petrol station, you name it. There's probably a way that you're already spending money somewhere that you can turn that into frequent flyer points.
Right. So, the name of the game is loyalty, really, isn't it? And from when we were preparing for this interview, what came across to me on it was it's about loyalty and consistency. So if you are going to, and we're not the ABC, so we can name everybody here, from BWS to Coles or wherever. It's about staying, not deviating to Aldi, isn't it? Like going off
They
there.
don't do frequent flyer points. They don't even take American Express, which so many of the points people would have to earn even more. So if you want points, that's probably not the right supermarket. But I mean, like Coles has the Flybuys program, which is partnered with Velocity, and you can transfer points there. And Woolworths has Qantas Frequent Flyer attached to everyday rewards. So yes, choosing your supermarket can be a lot more rewarding. As to how much you paid, always check the price on the shelves. But definitely, if you want frequent flyer points, there are certain supermarkets that are better than others.
Yeah, it is an interesting one that you really start drawing those lines about where you do shop and where you buy your petrol and where you're ordering as to which airline you go into, which makes me take a step back onto this one because while we might be flying those airlines, I mean, I fly on every airline in the world, and some of them are just, some of them are quite ridiculous, and that have no links with anybody else. But sometimes the schedules don't fit. You're shopping around on price. I mean, for my next trip, so because it's all about me, I've got a flight coming up with Emirates. So how do I maximize my points in this situation? Do I earn the points on an Emirates loyalty program? Should I put them back onto my Australian airline? Because we've been talking about Qantas and Virgin for this one. Most of us are more likely to fly domestically over internationally. And also, if you're going to be spending points, it's easier to say, grab a flight from Sydney to Melbourne rather than saving up for a long haul to London or something like that. Is that strategy correct? Should I be flying all those other airlines and then putting the points back on my Australian ones, or have I got it all wrong?
So what a lot of people do, whether they travel a lot or whether they travel once or twice a year, is maybe pick 2 or 3 frequent flyer programs to focus on. So in Australia, it makes complete sense to be a member of Qantas Frequent Flyer and Virgin Australia Velocity. That's a no-brainer. I mean, Qantas, there are ways of joining for free. Velocity is easy to join for free online, so you may as well sign up. Mm-hmm. When it comes to other programs, if you look at alliances and partnerships, so for Emirates, for instance, is a partner of Qantas in Australia. So as you've rightly said, you're probably more likely to end up on a lot more Qantas flights. Or if you are living in Australia, it's a lot easier to earn Qantas points in general than to earn miles with Emirates. So when I fly on Emirates, personally, I put that into my Qantas account. Right. And it's the same if you're a Velocity member and you're on Etihad. That's a partnership of Velocity, so I would put my Velocity number on that ticket. So for me, it's about focusing on the frequent flyer points where it's easier to earn more miles rather than signing up to every program under the sun to have points with every airline, because there's no point having 2,000 or 3,000 points here, a couple of thousand points there, and in the end, you've got all these points around all these programs, but you don't have enough to book a flight. Whereas if you've got them all in a neat couple of little piles, you might have enough to fly domestically. Or if you travel a lot more or earn points in other ways, you might be able to get one of those seats in row 1 across the Pacific.
Yeah, all right. But my fingers and toes are all crossed for that one. Interestingly, though, if you bring those points, if you use those Emirates points and put them back into Qantas, do I get the status credits when I do that?
So with Emirates is sort of an exception to how most of Qantas's partners work. Because Qantas is in One World, the alliance, they have rules about what can and can't happen with other partners. So in that instance, you're flying on an Emirates plane, Emirates flight number, you put your Qantas number on the ticket, you can earn points, but you won't earn status credits. So this happened to me last year, and I knew it would happen. It was the only way we could book the ticket, but I was fortunate to do Emirates business over to Europe and back. That would have been great if I could have earned status. That would have really pushed it up a notch, but you only earn points on the EK number. So you get around that by booking Emirates on a Qantas QF code share or on some of Qantas' other partners, American Airlines, British Airways, Cathay Pacific. That's where you can still earn status when you're traveling with that airline. Honestly, this is what we do at Point Hacks. There are so many little, TNCs and asterisks and everything everywhere as to what can and can't happen. And so it gets very, very complicated very quickly.
I've got to admit, I am not a fine print kind of girl, right? So that's why I want you. That's why I want you to solve my life for me. Because one of those things, as you say, there's tricks around them and stuff like that. What's less discussed is points sales, where airlines might drop the number of points that you'll need to earn on certain flights, or they give bonuses. That's a quick way, obviously, to boost your points, is to keep an eye on the sales, because the sales aren't always, buy a flight to Devonport for $29. It's like fly this route and get bonus points, or they've got sales on the actual points that it costs to fly up to, say, to fly Sydney, Melbourne. How do you find out about all of those sorts of opportunities? Is it a secret club? Can anyone join in? Do you set a watch list like you do with flights? It is a dark art. Throw a light on it for me.
It is. I mean, other than the obvious plug of reading Point Hacks, but we don't publish everything that we come across. There are far too many. Thank you. I appreciate it. But so it depends on your airline. So with Qantas, what we generally see with points is that occasionally they might charge fewer points for certain flights, and you'll generally get an email from Qantas when they're doing that sort of promotion. And I've seen that happens often when they're about to announce a really good financial result, or on the same day that they announce the financial result, to sort of trying to show that they're sharing something with their members. So the number of points you might need to fly Qantas could drop down to what you'd normally need for Jetstar or something like that. And I've been able to pounce and do a few of those bookings myself. With Virgin Australia, they're a bit more in the points camp of giving you bonus points. So I flew from Brisbane to Melbourne just over the weekend, and I obviously activated, I've forgotten I'd even done it because it was a month ago, but I'd activated a double points promotion and opened my Velocity app after the flight. I'm like, oh, I just earned 4,000 points for that flight. Okay, that was quite rewarding. And Virgin also now, it's not dynamic pricing, which is something that people really don't like overseas, where the number of points can be completely unpredictable. But what Virgin does now when you're booking domestic economy on points is they have a range that it could cost you. And there are sort of 3 tiers. And the middle tier is basically what it used to cost before this came in. The lower tier means you need fewer points than before, and the higher tier means you need more. So if you are flying within Australia, for me, that's Melbourne to Sydney, Melbourne to Brisbane, and you look at all the flights that day and you look at all the options, you might see that even though it's the same route, same cabin, same day, one flight might cost you, 12,000 points, and a different flight on the same day might cost you about 8,000. And you're having the same experience, you're paying the same amount in taxes and fees in dollars on the side of the ticket. But if you fly at a different time, you might need fewer points. It's the same as when you buy a cash ticket with money. Taking an off-peak flight could save you money. So looking at all your options can help you save points and travel more often.
Right. And I suppose looking on the app as well is always a really great one, rather than just relying on the website, like actually digging into the detail of it. A lot of us don't just fly those 2 carriers, though. What about low-cost carriers? We've got Rex, we've got Jetstar competing just in the Australian space. Do they have a point system that I should be working? Because sometimes, sometimes their scheduling just works, particularly coming out of Melbourne. If I don't want to do the 6 a.m. commuter red-eye specials, but I also need to get up there before midday, so 10 o'clock is too late. So sometimes you'll find that they can be the better airlines just in terms of when they run. Do they have anything that we should have on our radar?
They do. Well, a couple of them do. So Jetstar is owned by Qantas, and so they're part of Qantas Frequent Flyer. But the way that I don't want to say the way that they get you, but the thing to be aware of with Jetstar is that when you're on the cheapest ticket, the seat-only fare where nothing is included, that also means points are not included. So you have to buy one of the bundles that gives you a few other benefits and puts points on top. So if you're on the cheapest tickets, you won't earn anything on that. Bonza does not have a points program at this point, but Rex recently launched a program. It's in its early stages. You can only earn points by flying, and you can only spend those points on flights. You can't earn those points through a credit card or anything, but I was really fortunate. I've taken a couple of paid tickets on Rex, and I figured, well, I may as well earn some points on these. And I needed to fly from Melbourne to Brisbane at the beginning of the Australia Day long weekend, which is when the tennis is on, there's everyone flying, and of course, I'm trying to spend my Qantas points, my Velocity points. Couldn't find a seat that I could book on that day, and I went over to the Rex website with enough points in my account. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can get a ticket today for, it was like $40 or something, which included baggage and everything else by spending my points, because they probably don't have the largest membership compared to Qantas at this stage. People don't have anywhere near as many points to spend, and I could choose any flight that day I wanted, pay this tiny number of points. I was very happy. So I want to earn more points with them, but I can't without flying on them. So that's the next thing to develop. I'd love to see them come out with a credit card, because that would really shake up Qantas and Velocity.
Oh, that sounds amazing, because recently I had to fly with Rex, but it was on the Taylor Swift weekend. And let me tell you, there were no bargains. There was not a bargain in the sky. Now, we've been talking about earning, what about burning points? Apart from, what's the best way to use those points if you've got them, like me, Qantas, an inordinate amount of points, no status, still sitting, down the back of the toilet. Do you blow those points on in-flight shopping, buying a back massager, a food processor, or using them to buy an actual flight? Or, and here's the sub-question, should you just use those points for add-ons on the flight, such as upgrades? You could even put them on a hotel stay. Qantas, as you know, has a very strong hotel deals offering. So what's the best way? Because points actually have a value. I think that's something that we forget. They actually are a form of currency, aren't they?
Yeah, so they don't have a defined value, which is probably more of a tax thing for the airlines. And it depends on how you redeem them as to how much, value you'll get in terms of how much cash you would save. The thing that I always try and do is spend my frequent flyer points on flights and spend my hotel points, because the hotels have programs as well, spend my hotel points booking rooms at a hotel. And I find that's generally the best value, followed by using points to upgrade on a flight. So for me, if there is a seat in the cabin that I'm happy to fly and I can book that using points when I need to go somewhere, that's what I always prefer to do, even if it's economy. I used to think that was not the best value, and to be fair to the airlines, it probably wasn't. They used to charge you very high fees. The number of points you needed even to fly economy was quite high, and when you compared the cost of the cash ticket, it didn't make sense. But now the airlines have clued into that a bit more in the way, Virgin's reduced the number of points you need on some flights. The charges are a bit lower. So, I flew yesterday, Brisbane back home to Melbourne, and I booked that in economy on points. Again, spent $40 on the flight for a fare that would have cost $200. So in my head, I've just saved $160 by spending some points. But when you are flying as well, for me, I'm happy to do economy on a short flight, or a daytime flight to Asia is fine. If I'm doing an overnight flight and I have the points, though, who doesn't want that bed on the plane? And that's when the value of points really comes in, because sure, you can save some cash rather than having to pay for an economy ticket, but most of us don't have sort of money sitting around to buy full fare business or first class long haul whenever we need to travel. But if you've saved up a nice balance of points, you might be able to do that without breaking the bank.
Right. So if you are going for that upgrade, and there is that saying, if you don't ask, you don't get. When do you ask? I mean, you're in a league of your own. You have an inordinate amount of points everywhere, and by being a member of those frequent flyer programs means that the airline is going to look at you more benevolently than if you are, a diehard on the opposite side of the team. But for the rest of us, with mediocre balances, how's the best way to get that upgrade? Do we bid online? Do we go to the information desk when we're checking in? Do we even buy it in flight on the plane? Which is the best way to do it?
So if you're spending points, the best way is to try and get that upgrade well before you're at the airport. So generally, if we're flying domestically, from the time you've booked, you might be able to upgrade using your points online, and you might be able to confirm that upgrade at the time of your request. So that happens with Qantas and Virgin. So if you have enough points, they have a seat available for an upgrade, doesn't mean that they're just selling a seat. They decide how many upgrades and things they want to process on each flight. But you may be able to get that upgrade by sitting in your lounge room, almost a year before the flight. Other ways you can do it if you don't have as many points is that the airlines, as you said, will accept bids as well. So you can, depending on the airline, bid cash, you can bid dollars, or sometimes a combination of them both. And the airlines will normally process those after the points upgrade. So it's better to have points. But if you don't have points, and I've done this a lot too, even if I have had points, I just didn't want to spend them. You just put a bid in. I often just put the minimum bid or the minimum bid plus $5 to outbid everyone else who's just done the minimum bid. And if there are seats, it tends to be quite successful. So I think I've had like a Melbourne-Brisbane upgraded for less than $100 one day, and I was very happy with that. But that's not really the norm. So some airlines, I think Emirates will let you upgrade on board. You can try and upgrade at the gate. If you get on the plane and you're in a middle seat, or you really don't like your seatmate and you have points in their Skywards program, you can go have a quiet word with the crew and say, how many miles do I need to go not sit here and sit somewhere else? And at that point, if there is any seat available on the plane, they will happily take those miles off you because they're about to close the door and earn nothing for that ticket. So if they can take some miles off your hand and fill an empty seat, they'll take them off you. But you have to ask. So if you can't get it before the flight, ask at check-in. If you can't get it at check-in, ask in the lounge, or if you don't have lounge access, just go to the service desk at the airport and just ask, can I use my Qantas points, Velocity points, whatever currency you have with the airline you're flying? see what they say. The worst they can do is say, "Oh, I'm sorry, there are no upgrades available," and you're still sitting where you were 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, right. I mean, I've been unlucky. I don't know. Every time I try to get a minimum bid, the starting point is at $500 or something like that. But then, Kirsty and I were talking about this beforehand, and she brought her whole family up to a premium economy on Air New Zealand, and premium economy on Air New Zealand is the equivalent of, is better than business class for many carriers. And she paid only about $100 a person. So they were doing, across to New Zealand, and I think on a night flight, which I think sounds absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to try that. I just wanted to ask you a little bit about credit cards, because when we've talked about this in the past, you have always said that credit cards really are a way of ramping up your points, like giving them an absolute jump. So can you just explain a little bit about how to? I mean, we are manipulated by credit cards. How do we manipulate the credit cards back?
So, I mean, when you're earning points on a credit card, it's always just worth flagging right up front that the cards that earn points generally have the highest interest rates of any other types of credit cards in Australia. So the people that want to earn points off cards like myself, the strategy generally should be pay off the card every month in full. So firstly, if you're not going to be paying off your card in full, if it's better to carry a balance, then frequent flyer cards probably aren't the right fit. I just want to say that up front because that's very important. But if you are in a position to be paying off your cards in full, something to look into and to consider is that many cards will offer you frequent flyer points, and not just on the money that you spend every day, but it can be possible to earn a large number of points just by taking out a new card, applying for it, being accepted for it, and making a minimum spend on the card, which often is in the range of a few $1,000s. So some people might do that, put all their household bills on the card, make sure they hit their bonus points offer, and then they also then have a card in their wallet to keep earning points on as they keep spending. And it's fair to say that people's financial needs change from time to time, and this is not personal financial advice, but it's the fact that you may want to keep looking at credit cards, because you might get a card that's very travel themed if you're doing a lot of trips, and then suddenly you might not travel as far anymore, so you might not need a card that gives you all the lounge access and hotel status. And that might be another time to consider applying for a new product. So there are a lot of ways to earn points through cards, but even just using the card for everything. For me, I don't carry cash. I put everything I can on my points earning credit cards, pay the bills off in full. Then you have all these rewards ready to spend. And even if there's a very small surcharge to use a card, I still find it worth it because I get more value out of my points than what the fee normally is to make that payment. But some people can earn 150,000 points by signing up to one credit card. It's a very easy way of getting a nice little sum of points. And at Point Hacks, we focus on all of those latest deals. We sometimes negotiate deals with the banks that are better than what the bank will offer its own customers. So we can offer no annual fee sometimes, or even more points for having one card. So there are always keep your eyes out for the latest deals and just see what's available. And don't be afraid to reconsider if the cards you're currently using are not doing what they should for you in terms of.
Well, I think that's one of the that financial hygiene is now being beaten into our heads now that we're all looking more closely at things like our mortgages and reassessing our financial positions too. That is a really valid point. So credit cards, looking at where you're spending, even Coles and Woolworths have their own alliances with the airlines as well. Now, I'm going to ask you the last question, which is a question we ask all of our guests, and that is, what is your most bizarre travel experience? It does not have to include a plane or a business class or a first class experience, but I'd really love it. Just go ahead.
Oh, yeah, they're related but unrelated. Look, for me, it's the coincidences of travel. So I often was flying to London on business a lot before COVID, and I had a really good friend who used to live in Brisbane, and I would see him all the time in Brisbane. He then moved to Melbourne, and despite all the travel I was doing, we were just never in the same place. But somehow, him living in Melbourne, me living in Brisbane, we always ended up being in London without even trying at exactly the same time. So even if I was in London for one day and I would send a message, he would happen to just be there on business at the same time. And this just happened time and time again for years and years. And the coincidences just got just so, bizarre. Like I was in London, it was a very big trip. I was over in New York. I'd flown into London in the afternoon. I had one night in London, and the next morning I was off to Taipei for another meeting. And I texted him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm here. And oh, by the way, it's opening night of Chess the musical at the Coliseum. I have a spare ticket." And it was the night the guys from ABBA were going to come on stage at the end. I'm like, okay, so I'm literally here for 24 hours, and you're here, and half of ABBA is here. And it's just, he was always in the same city. And then last year, I hadn't been to London since 2019. Obviously, COVID happened and I hadn't raced back.
Yeah.
And so mid-2013, I was meant to be flying to Oslo, and I was doing it because I had used points. It was a bit of a convoluted way of getting there. I was flying Sydney to LA, oh gosh, what was it, up to Copenhagen to Helsinki to Oslo or something, because that's where I could get a seat. Qantas had delayed my flight by 12 hours, and so I'd rebooked all my connections, via London it ended up being, and then they had changed my flight back to remove the cancellation after I had just rebooked all the other tickets, and I couldn't get my original seats back. And so I wasn't meant to have any time in London, and I land in LA at 8 in the morning. My flight to London leaves at midnight, and I go up to the very nice person at the American Airlines service desk. I'm like, I have a very long connection. Can I get to London any earlier and just, maybe spend a day in London? And they press buttons on their computer and they actually had a seat, and they were able to change it for me. And I land at Heathrow. I turn my phone on. I'm on Facebook, and I see he's checked in London. He's like, "Oh, great business trip to London. I'm off to Heathrow now to fly home," right as I've touched down at Heathrow. So we're going to be literally in the same building at the same time. I'm like, oh my gosh, and we just went and got a coffee, and I hadn't seen him for a couple of years. And of course, the one time I'm in London in 4 years is when he's at the airport again. So hi, Jared. That will tell me when you're next in London. I'll probably see you there.
That's a shout out to Jared. That is absolutely fantastic. Chris, I love your life. I watch it with great glee. Where can people, if anyone wants to follow you on Instagram and see the fabulous things that you do, how do they do that?
So I'm at Chris_Chamberlain on Instagram, and our company account is PointHacksAU.
Fantastic.
So we have content on both.
Gorgeous. All right. Well, I shall follow along to see where I see you next. Maybe it'll actually be in Melbourne, which is where we both are. So thanks so much for joining us on The World Awaits. It's been gorgeous to have you here.
Thanks very much for having me, Belle.
That was Chris Chamberlain from Point Hack's website. We're amazed at just how much he does travel. 2 million kilometres. You can read more of his trips on how to fly in first class, as well as his flight and airport reviews at pointhacks.com.au. And next up is Mark Trim, the founder of Complex Travel Group. Stay tuned as he shares his insider secrets on airlines to watch, alternative routes, and the best time to buy. He also shares tips on booking in shoulder seasons and the Asian gateways, offering great live flat deals.
Mark, welcome to The World Awaits. We're so happy to have you here. Love a little Av Geek session.
Thanks for having me.
Now, just tell us briefly, how did you get into the travel industry? Because you started quite early, and what's your focus now with with you have many arms to your business?
Yeah, I was doing this half my life, actually. I started in the travel industry. I was 20, just in a retail sort of environment, doing the training, that sort of thing. And, wanted to take over the world by the time I was 25, I think. And, quickly realized there was a bit of a corporate queue to get behind. So at 23, my wife and I, now wife, started our own company, which was Roundabout Travel, specializing in round the world airfares. And we started that 2008, about 6 weeks before the GFC. So great time to quit your job and go out on your own.
Good time.
Which was, edgy experience. So I think we were working from home before it was popular to work from home. And built that up over a number of years, started growing the company and growing the niche in round the world airfares and sort of more complex itineraries. And then from there, we added on a range of other brands as we got more repeat clients and interest. Oh, we did around the world last year. Would you do this? Would you do that? And as we did that, we sort of added on some extra specialties. So Flatbeds is one of our brands, which looks after business class travel. It's a long-haul, value-based business class airfares. We added on a brand called Q-Flyer, which manages travel for high-tier Qantas frequent flyers, looking to maximize status credits, and a number of others. So we really play in that more complicated airfare space. I've always enjoyed that side of airfares as a travel agent. it's the best way to sort of show off your skills, I guess, the more, complex the itinerary is. So that was really where the name came from. Both our structure is complex and that we've got five, soon to be 6 brands, and what we do is pretty complex. So we like to sort of play in the mud, I guess, in terms of airfares and the tricky parts of the industry.
So that means that you've really got an overview, like you can look above and see the trends of where we're traveling. And I mean, the US and Europe are probably the biggest. So where are we actually all going? Where are we going?
Yeah, I think definitely for us, the big markets, so the US and Europe. Europe's really the hero, I guess, out of Australia for most of the industry. And I think the US is, sort of secondary to that, but obviously still a major focus. And then the rest sort of makes up the balance probably. In the around the world space, we find that 70% of our clients' main focus is Europe, and then North America is a nice to have. And it's probably the reverse. So those who are doing, both continents, probably 30% of their primary focus is North America. And that's still growing. I mean, there's a mix of travelers that, as the market matures, who still will obviously do maybe a 1 week in Thailand, and they might do a 3 or 5 week trip in Europe, or, per year. So they'll maybe have a flop and drop somewhere, Bali, like I say, Thailand, Vietnam, Fiji. That might be their sort of holiday. And then the actual traveling is typically Northern Hemisphere. Obviously, Japan's been growing a lot recently, and other little hot spots. But I mean, Europe's always going to be there. And then where in Europe is another conversation, really. But, growth areas like Portugal, Croatia, Scandinavia, etc. But the core stuff like in UK, France, Italy, that's still very strong and a big part of the market, ex-Australia, I think.
And then the flying into into the US, the core destinations that we're gunning into, where are we going there?
Yeah, I think, you still see most of the airfares routed through a key hub, and then people exploring, from there. I think the US has flattened a little bit, just to be honest with you, from the dollar and the higher price of airfares across the Pacific, but there's a little bit more sort of promotional activity to help sort of bolster that. So the US has probably flattened a little. I think a lot of the skiing market, for example, is a big market. A lot of skiers out of Australia. I think Colorado, Utah are definitely suffering from Australians not going there and going to either Whistler or to Japan because the dollar's much better there. Yeah. So still some people going there, of course. New York's huge for Australians. I think in Times Square must be, 20% full of Aussies. So New York's always a strong one. Disneyland, Disney World for families, that sort of thing. The road trips and sure people getting out a bit more regionally is there. But it doesn't seem to have that growth that probably Europe, other parts of Europe is having. But yeah, US is still a big market.
So how much have airfares changed since COVID? They seem to be, I think I've just about got bill shock, built into my brain, but they still seem to be far in excess of what we paid just a couple of years ago. Is that really the case, or is that just what we're being told?
Yeah, that's a good question. In effect, we have to remember the last time we booked airfares for COVID, whilst it was 2020, most of those bookings were made in 2019, right? So we're getting on 5 years ago. Yeah. Nothing in the world is ever cheaper or as it was 5 years ago. So I think it's understanding that, there's going to be a little bit of a soft landing on price, but I wouldn't expect things to go back to 2019 levels. It's just unrealistic. Airlines have had a lot of, the unions are pretty strong for, airports, airlines, pilots, etc. Globally. So there's extra wage costs, obviously operating costs, all of us, there's obviously cost of living prices, businesses have them as well. So I don't think we'll see them come down to that level, but they are sort of flattening or softening a little bit. In terms of changes, it's not just the amount of change, but the pace of change and in what areas. So the market is moving very quickly in terms of how complicated it's becoming. Airlines are changing their technology. The kinds of airfares are changing. They're being unbundled at an increasingly fast pace.
Sorry, by unbundled, you mean? Unbundled, you mean like buy the seat and then you add on things like meals, yes, movies, extra luggage, or fast tracking and all of that sort of thing.
Right, which is which is a way of, increasing their revenues. With airlines know that people shop on the main airfare, right? Like what you're saying, that's that bill shop. So how can they make up some of those revenue gaps through ancillaries? So that change in the industry is really interesting. And that's probably the big thing from post-COVID. Airlines don't want people to be able to do comparative shopping. They don't want you to just see it as a price on a website, one seat is equal.
So fares have gone up. You can't comparatively shop them, but we still feel like we're out of pocket. So how do we hack those fares? What tips have you got for getting a great airfare? Because look, I live on Google Flights, on Skyscanner. Show me a comparative shopping site for flights, and I'm like an animal at it. I'm like a dog at a bone, and you do tie yourself in knots for it. But how do we hack those fares? How do we get? What are some of the key tips when you're shopping for an airfare, either to Europe or the US?
The US is a little bit easier than Europe. I'll say that much.
Okay, right.
Are a bit more simple. However, a lot of that opportunity cost-wise at the moment will either be when the sales are coming out, so timing it correctly, because there is a lot of routine sale activity for North America. And outside of those periods, the fares are very high. So there's this huge discrepancy between sort of on sale and off sale. So like people have got used to now playing the waiting game for the US, because it's about every 5 to 10 weeks there'll be a sale on. That's largely Qantas being the price leader and others following. The other way to I don't like the word hack because I think it cheapens things. It's like hacking your weight loss is tricky. But that aside, that my personal pet peeve with hack aside, probably the other opportunities go through Asia. So if you're happy to trade a bit of your travel time up and maybe make that into an additional experience, so stopping in Tokyo, Seoul, sometimes Hong Kong, but Japan is probably the big one with both JAL, ANA, the Korean Airlines, having better fares than the carriers going across the Pacific. So if you miss out on a sale and you're getting inside 3 to 4 months, you may not be able to wait for the next sale. So timing is important. In general, with the US, you can book on a little less lead time, but in Europe, certainly the lead time is very important, particularly if you're anywhere near school holidays and things like that.
So what sort of lead time are we going at? We talked about this last week. Kirsty, my co-host, books way in advance, and I am seat of the pants. Let's see where we can go next week kind of girl. So go on, school me in this. Yeah,
look, you can go both ways. I think if you leave it last minute, you sort of need to go where the airfares, what's left. If you prefer to have something planned more specifically, that's a very expensive strategy typically. The sweet spot for me is about 8 to 9 months out for Europe. You don't have to do it the full 10, 11. If you're off peak, you'll probably get away with 4 to 6 months. Inside 6 months I'm talking July, December, January, you just see prices going up and up. So effectively there's different strategies for northern winter and northern summer. So you can you'll get away with a much shorter lead time for the northern winter outside of our December, January holidays. But northern summer, the big trend in the last year or so is that September is becoming the new high season. It's wild. Like the demand for September into early October, I've never seen it like this in the past. And I think that's on the back of heat waves and, fires in Greece and some of the things that happened last year. Couple that with the Olympics, people are looking to go, shoulder. We're yet to see that really apply to May. So May is one of if you wanted to hack it, I think May through to early June is a great time to go actually get good weather. The European and the US crowds aren't there, and you'll get a good price from about September, October. So you can be booking that 7, 8 months out. But really that northern summer in Europe is one season or one booking season. So the right time to be booking May, June, July is typically the best time to be booking July, August, September. And that's why September has this huge lead time. It has like a 10 to 12 month lead, 10, 11 months lead time, whereas April, May, June probably has more like a 6 to 8 month lead time because they all come out at the same time. And so we still get a lot of demand for September, October from February, March of the same year. And we're like, people have been booking this for 4 months already. The price is going up, seats are selling out, particularly in the premium cabins. So we will see the economy prices soften. Airlines do need help in the back of the plane, but so many more people want to travel with premium economy, business and first, as equities go up, or depending on what stage of the life they're at, baby boomers and things like this. And they've got the discretionary income. So, the airlines are still being able to hold on to some of those high prices at the front of the plane.
Right. And I mean, timing is just one thing, but then there's also, as you mentioned just earlier about, having different routes, say, to the US going via Asia, because the hardest part I always find is just that flight getting out of Australia. Once you're out of Australia, it seems to be so much easier. I mean, we were talking before. I'm the mistress of the alternative route. So, I recently went to London via Brunei on Royal Brunei, which was really interesting. We've been seeing a lot of, going to the Middle East via Malaysia or Thailand even. Are there airlines that people just, putting aside the whole, I want to get there as fast as I can on the most direct route, which is the one that's going to be lightening your back pocket. Are there airlines that always are just sort of in your peripheral vision that you think, hey, let's take a look at those ones? Are there any little regional performers that you think that Australians have overlooked?
100%. And that is almost what we specialize in, really. I mean, you talked about Google Flights, Skyscanner. Yes, they're going to bring up the big players, but it's the niche boutique airlines that they don't have the same technology. And as an agent, we can construct fares with these carriers. Yes, there's a few great ones. Our number one in the last couple of years has definitely been Oman Air, particularly in business class, just because the price difference is greater than in economy to like Emirates and Qatar Airways and things. So Oman Air, fantastic quality airline, boutique carrier. They go through an Asian hub like Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok, and Jakarta, even Manila. So yes, through sort of some interesting Asian ports, then through Muscat, which is a really interesting stopover, and then into about 5 or 6 ports in Europe. And we're moving over $10 million a year of that product. So quite a high volume for a small airline. Would be one of their bigger agents in Australia. And business class prices around high 5 to sort of 7K. So if you book with it some notice, you can get about $6,000 in business class, fully flat beds the whole way. Really good quality product. You can even use Qantas to Manila and Qantas to Bangkok. So you're getting that Qantas to Asia, which is really high quality. I mean, that's worth $4,000 just to Asia. And you're getting that as part of a $6,000 airfare. So that's a great option. Finnair is a huge one for us. Great for Qantas frequent flyer point maximization and status credits. Again, an airline that flies under the radar, really good value, a little bit higher than they were pre-COVID, definitely, but still a great airline with a really interesting product this in the front of the plane, but good in economy as well. And Turkish Airlines definitely coming up now, flying from Melbourne, but also servicing the rest of Australia with partner carriers. So through that Asian gateway system, again, we can create some really interesting itineraries with that, mixing and matching gateways and just stuff that doesn't come up online at price points that are much cheaper than some of the other airlines. So there definitely are a few of those carriers out there. And I guess that's where, as doing this professionally, where, yes, you can have a look online at home, that's fine, but what you will see versus what someone with actual system access and knowledge and how to put things together is, a little bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nice to have somebody to bounce those ideas off. I mean, I've flown Oman a few times and used them as an alternative way to get up into the Middle East and onto Asia as well. Gorgeous airline and great airport too. Like really, since they renovated their airport, just beautiful. Like it's a really what I like about them is that they are not generic. They're very, very much of their region. Now, I was really interested in your round the world ticket specialization. The last time I used one, I think I booked one on frequent flyer points and with Qantas, and I learned an awful lot. I did it myself. It was it did break my life a little bit, but there were a lot of rules about it too. You could only go in one direction. You couldn't backtrack and things like that. I don't know if that's the case, but if I've got, it's something that sort of, generally people have always thought round the world ticket, that's for a backpacker who's got loads of time and very little money. But if I'm doing a multi-stop trip, Should I be thinking about them?
Absolutely. I think actually that's a huge misconception that it's just backpackers. So we were the only around the world airfare specialist in Australia. We move 50 million plus of these airfares every year. I would say less than 5% of the market is backpackers. It is actually people looking to get a better value ticket. At times they can be cheaper, but they're always a great value option. So understand that, okay, maybe 10 or 20% more than a return ticket, but I get a whole extra continent in there. So instead of just going to Europe, I can go to Europe and North America and still include my Asian stop. So they are really a great value option. It's just a matter of, have you got that extra week or two, to see something else? So we do a lot of these over school holidays, people that might have 6 weeks, or every European summer when they've got 6, 8, 10, 12-week holidays. They're not typically, yes, we do the 12-month gap years and probably more flash packing than backpacking. I don't think backpackers are actually onto these airfares. It's probably that slightly older, they're in that next stage of life where they've probably learned a few more lessons. Backpackers learn things the hard ways with airfares usually. They look something that's too cheap, they mess it up, they learn some lessons in life. So flashbacking maybe is a good market for us, but they're incredible. I mean, there's so much you can do with them. The thing is, they're the most complex ticket out there. There's rules. Like when I started the company, I got a tagline was simply around the world, and we don't use it much now, but the whole point of it was we'll try to simplify that for the client. Like, let us take care of the rules and apply those in the best way and give you some options and things. So there's a lot of technicality, yes, but sometimes things like we can't backtrack are taken out of context is actually like a whole nother layer of what that means. So you can, but only in certain situations, and how much can, so some fares allow it, some don't. So it's not a black and white thing. Sometimes people book one ticket, like your experience is very common, and then they'll hold on to this notion of what applied in 2017 when I did this applies forever. They do this with airfares in general, right? They have this sticky expectations. Now, this is not how things work. So, but yes, you can get amazing. I mean, an economy around the world airfare for $2,500 to $3,500. You can see some great destinations on that. If you go to $4,000, you're going to get 5 stops, more inclusions, some more unique cities. So they're good value. Business class around the world airfares anywhere from $8,000 to say $11,000 for something basic through to something with more inclusions. And we do some really big ones covering heaps of ground for say $15,000. But nowadays, hey, return to New York can be 15K. So if you're getting 10 stops for $15,000, you can get a lot of value. But probably our most sort of common or sweet spot is 3 to 5 stops. And then people just use them as a base, and then they'll move around internally. So they might just fly into Rome, out of Paris, into New York, out of LA, and then organize train, car, etc. to get around. So they're our most popular, and they're definitely not backpacker actually. So, but they're amazing value and still in the market in a big way.
But it's away from coming from Australia into Asia and then Europe and around to the US and back to Australia. Is that the sort of
That's the most common. Yeah, you can do that with South America and Africa and things as well. I think the growth in certain airlines has moved some of that away to Africa, because now that the Middle Eastern carriers can get you there quite cheaply, we don't see a huge amount of that. Definitely the typical is, Asia, Europe, North America, or vice versa. You can go in either direction. I always think going west is best for jet lag and that sort of thing. But the 3 continents like that. It worked great for Canada. There are certain markets where it's just cheaper to keep going, like Eastern Canada. If you're going to Toronto, you might as well do it around the world. In general, if you're doing that East Coast, Boston, etc., it's a good option just to kind of keep going. And it's really one extra day of travel. So I always think, Sydney, London, Sydney, New York, give or take, say it's 24 hours for each, right? Yeah. Well, so it's just that 1 8-hour flight across the Atlantic. So one extra day of your travel, and you've basically done around the world. So versus going back there, for families, we do a lot of it. If they just want to take the kids to Disneyland and they wanted to go to Europe, they'll combine it. And then we have a lot of people that have like family in one continent, but they really want to visit the other. So they're, my son lives in London, but we want to do we go into a Canada-Alaska cruise. They'll just combine them both into around the world. They're a great option.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, well, that's another one to look at. So now the final question, which we ask all our guests, and I'm really interested to hear this, is what is the most bizarre travel experience that you've had?
Ooh, that's an interesting one.
I know, and you've got to think about it too, haven't you?
I'm a bit of a travel princess.
Okay, that was unexpected.
So, I've been in the industry for a long time, and we travel a lot, like frequently, but not for a long duration. So I am not someone who goes to a lot of third world countries. There's not too many bizarre situations you can have at a Four Seasons or an Oman hotel or something. However, I'd probably say the most bizarre I had was probably Akureyri in Iceland. We were there last year, and I just spent so that's northern part of Iceland, and I just remember spending the whole day out the window, constantly saying to my wife, like, feels like we're on the moon, like we're in Mars or something. Like just the landscape, the volcanic impact on that land, and what you see, the bubbling mud pits and the just sulfur and hot springs, but just this lava fields and things. It just felt, they film a lot of movies there, and Game of Thrones, etc. And just some of that landscape, it was bizarre. It just didn't feel like anywhere else I'd ever been. So that's probably the best one for me. Yeah, but an incredible part of the world, Iceland. Highly recommend it. We got pretty lucky with the weather, but nice part of the world in July.
Fantastic. Oh, that sounds like a great one. And I think, we should all be booking flights to Iceland at the moment. Mark, thanks so much for your time on the podcast. It's been great to tap into your knowledge and your experience. And we'll put some of the suggestions in the show notes, as well as the Complex Travel Group. So thanks again for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
That was Mark Trim talking about getting the best airfares to Europe and the US. And you can find out more about Complex Travel Group at complextravel.com.au. Next week, we're back into our regular schedule, and we're kicking off 2025 with a dream destination, Italy's Amalfi Coast, with the fabulous Australian-Italian author Maria Pasquale.
And we love to hear from our listeners, so please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Click onto our profile, scroll down to the bottom to leave a star rating, and if you're on Spotify, go to our main page and click the 3 dots underneath our photo, or simply drop us a line at hello@theworldawaits.au. Thanks for joining us on The World Awaits Summer Series. See you next time.